If you live with Parkinson's, you already understand this intuitively, even if you've never heard the term. Thinking and moving at the same time doesn't just feel harder, it oftentimes feels impossible. Walking while talking, turning while planning the next step, balancing while deciding what comes next. That's dual tasking. And the issue isn't that these tasks are necessarily difficult in isolation. It's that when the movement loses automaticity, the brain has to explicitly allocate attention. So instead of movement running in the background, the nervous system has to decide, do I stabilize posture? Do I process language? Do I monitor the environment? So when allocation is efficient, both tasks can coexist. But when it's inefficient, one task degrades, and almost always that task is movement. That's why you might see shorter steps, maybe a reduced arm swing, some freezing, or maybe even postural collapse under that cognitive load. So here's where most dual task approaches break down. They confuse exposure with learning. They confuse a test with actual training. So you're asked to walk while counting backwards by sevens. The interference is obvious. You can't do it. And then the task ends. And there's another cost that doesn't get talked about enough. Many people with Parkinson's were engineers, physicians, teachers, problem solvers. When training is reduced to simplistic or childlike tasks, it can quietly send the message, this is all you're capable of now. And that's not just inaccurate, it can be harmful because the brain adapts not only to tasks, but to expectations. So to be fair, there is a reason the bar is often set so low. In research settings, simple tasks are easier to standardize, easier to replicate, easier to teach in large groups. You can put a room full of people together and hand out props and run a class. That's easy. This is why we're very deliberate about how dual tasking is trained. And when we say we prioritize movement, we're not removing cognition, we're restructuring it. The goal is to build cognitive strategies that facilitate movement, not compete with it. And like any physiological system, this requires a base. You don't build high intensity capacity without aerobic efficiency. You don't load maximal strength without foundational motor control. Dual tasking follows the same principle. We begin with structured cognitive motor coupling, predictable rhythms, intentional sequencing, cognitive anchors that reinforce posture, timing, step length, etc. At this stage, cognition is stabilizing, not disruptive. And as the system adapts, we progressively introduce variability. I often describe this musically. You start with practicing the scales, then the notation changes, but you're still playing a clear tempo. Then you add syncopation, then you add asymmetry, and eventually the rhythm becomes fragmented, but the movement remains coherent. That's the signal that automaticity is returning, not because attention disappears, but because the nervous system has learned how to allocate resources more efficiently. Stress modulation is the final piece. Any interference produces a physiological stress response, elevated heart rate, altered breathing. In high pressure environments, even elite athletes lose precision when attentional demand exceeds capacity. Yet, paradoxically, acute urgency can transiently improve movement. This is paradoxical kinesia. And in emergencies, people with Parkinson's have access motor output that seemed unavailable moments earlier. So sometimes salience will override interference. Dual task training done correctly recreates this effect in controlled microdoses. And over time, this expands stress tolerance, it raises the interference threshold, and it stabilizes cognitive motor integration. So to learn more about the dual task system we developed, click on the link below.